Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. Today I wanted to talk about something that's kind of frustrating for everybody in the United States. Anybody who's paying attention to what's going on in Washington, D.C., that is. Because there are a lot of people who are not, and they never have been and they never will be. And that's okay, because they're the people who are still doing their jobs, and they're like I was for many years. I would come home at the end of the day. I'd get up early in the morning, work hard, and then come home, and at the end of the day I would be tired and I didn't want to deal with politics. That's where a lot of people are now. But there are a lot of, so let's say those are the people that when they vote, they really don't know. They're not informed voters. When the impeachment trial that's going on, so many people are, let's say there's this big pool of people who are not aware of what's going on, and they're going to be pulling things one way or the other. And I understand that because I was there too. So now the informed voters, so let's say that the informed voters are another pool of people, and those people are either informed by, let's say, the conservative media outlets, or the more liberal ones, or let's say the middle of the road ones like PBS that just report the news. Okay, so there's the spin on either side, liberal or conservative or whatever, and then there's the ones that, the outlets that just report the news, and those are the ones that basically are not swaying anything. They're just reporting the facts. But then, so people are saying, what are the facts? Are they, who's more informed than the other people? They're all informed, but it's just a different kind of information. So what I wanted to do today is I wanted to talk about an idea that's a little bit different than that, because that's kind of the way things are normally, that we like our own culture, we like to be in our own culture, and that's the way it is normally. But things are not normal now, and what's happening in the news from both perspectives is that we're watching something happen that is very unusual, very abnormal. So people who are addressing the plan for world peace, they're interested in different things. This is kind of where we are as a nation, but it's the same phenomenon that's happening all over the world. The schism that's been happening now, the Christian church has talked about Armageddon and the rapture and the people who are left behind and the people who are taken. And this is basically the time when Armageddon is happening, when the people who are standing on the principles are going up in power, and the people who are going down in power, the people who are grabbing for power because they don't have it. This is where what we're seeing in Washington, D.C. and related to Donald Trump. Whenever the Democrats who are standing on the principles are standing on the principles, it threatens the security and support of the Republicans who go down into the power games. So whenever this trial that were Donald Trump's impeachment trial, every time the Democrats just keep talking and talking about the principles, that he broke the law, he's doing all this, and what's happening is it keeps threatening the Republicans, and they keep going down in power. But the problem that we have now is that we're watching the same thing happening in the Republican Party. So it was the Democrats who went up and stood on the principles, but we're also watching the same kind of schism happening within the Republican Party. We have the people like Jeff Flake and Cindy McCain and Governor Ducey. They're all basically standing on the principles, and they're going, the Republican Party is going to censure us because we're standing on principles. It's the same phenomenon that's happening within the Republican Party. We are seeing the people like like that, and then we see the people who are going down into power. Whenever that happens, they're going into grabbing power, like the Republican Party officers, and then you see the average Republicans, and their lives are affected, and then you're seeing the people who say they're part of the Republican Party, but they're functioning from their own interests. It's the same schism that happened pretty much in the Democratic Party when in the 2016 election, when Bernie Sanders, who's all principles, stood on the principles, and every time he did it, threatened the security and support of Hillary Clinton, who went down into the power games. And the games, you lose power, but at the same time, the person who's standing on the principles is losing power too, because it's like this attack that's happening against them. Okay, so where does this go from now? We have in the Republican Party, we have the four segments. The people stand on principles, grab for power, their lives are affected, and the people function for their own interests. And let's say that what we have then is the people who are, let's say, functioning for their own interests, are bringing guns onto the floor of the House and the Senate. Okay, they believe that they are standing on their rights to do that. But these people here are 180 degrees from where they think they are, and basically they believe they have their rights, but they're not standing on the law. They believe they're standing on the law, but they're not. So then each of these groups are going to be schisming also too. And then the schism keeps schisming down to the point where it's down to the individual level. Okay, so that's where we are now, is each of these groups, the World Peace Marketing Strategy that I showed you before. This is backwards. I haven't flipped the camera here. This is the World Peace Marketing Strategy, and you can find it on, I'll put the link on it below, and on our website. But each one of these has something that they want. And so as they go, it's like doorways. So doorway number 1 is for the people who stand on the principles. Doorway 2 is for the people who are grabbing for power. Doorway 3 is for the people whose lives are affected. And doorway 4 is for the people who function for their own interests. As they go through that idea, then they follow the information on here, the projects and ideas here, and then that is when they get the life they want. Okay, they cannot get their life by bringing guns onto the floor. I'm going to take this back 5, 6, 7,000 years, and I'm going to look at Stonehenge now. And we're going to look at how the same doorways are there, located, the same 5 doorways are located that are part of this, are located there. There's 5 big sets of standing stones. They're kind of in a horseshoe shape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There are only 4 here. The number 5 door is the straight ahead door, and that's the one that's the future. That's the future. That's our children. Those are the people who are growing up. Those are the people, the young people who are working now, and they don't have time for politics. When I go to a town hall meeting, our congressman's town hall meeting, there isn't anybody under 60 years old, under 65 years old. We're all retired people because we are the ones who are basically concerned about politics. We want to see that the future is safe. We're going to stand up and fight for the future. We're taking everything we know. We now have the time, and we're going to fight for the future. Okay, that's what happened in Stonehenge. The people who stood on the principles, it was supposed to be a battle between the people who stood on the principles and the people who were grabbing for power. Let's say that there was the 2 kings, and one is getting revenge. The one stands on the principles, and this one is getting, the people stand on power games are getting revenge. But then what happens is you have the people who get revenge, and they say, I want to win this, so I'm going to bring in a third king to back me up on this. Now, this is the scary part right now, is because Donald Trump is breaking the law. He's no longer president of the United States. And one of the articles of impeachment was he just broke the law in front of everybody. It was a conflict of interest, not conflict of interest, it was obstruction of justice. He threatened the senators that if they didn't vote to acquit him, that he was going to do something to them, primary them or whatever. So they're looking at that and they're saying, so what happens if Donald Trump, so let's clear this away now, the Republicans, all this battle about the impeachment. And let's say that, what is the final fight going to be? Is it going to be Republicans and Democrats if they're all schisming? Everything is kind of falling apart? Or is it going to be between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin? We have a problem here, and that is because when Donald Trump brought in the Russians to interfere with our election, we now have the final battle. It's not between Donald Trump and Joe Biden getting revenge on somebody who's standing on the principles. Donald Trump brought in the Russians, and that is happening all over the Eastern Europe with all the countries that undermining what's happening in the local governments. So we're dealing with hostile takeover, and the same thing that happened at Stonehenge. You see the doorway, the 5 doorways. The middle doorway that goes into the future was vandalized, and the doorway about the people who function for their own interests, those are the people, the 4th row, those are the people who function for their own interests and start rebellions. So they're the ones who bring the guns in onto the floor. Those are the people like Donald Trump who had all the power, and now he's bringing in Vladimir Putin to back him up. Okay, that's what he did. He did that with the election. Now, I'm not calling this a problem. I'm not accusing him of anything. I have absolutely no proof. But what I do have is I know that the history repeats itself, and we're looking at Stonehenge, and the next generation of Stonehenge. We're part of the history of Stonehenge. We are like 2 kings, one Vladimir Putin and one Joe Biden. The first kings are going to be Saddam Hussein's lieutenant and George W. Bush to end the Iraq War. But the second, then what they're going to do is we're going to deal with the dispute between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin to end the conflict in the United States, the hostile takeover. Because when they vandalized, when, let's say, the Beakers were there, the Beaker Society was there, and when one of the kings brought in the ally, and that was the person who basically, let's say, Donald Trump, and then as he brought him in, Putin in, then Donald Trump is collapsing because he grabbed for power, but Putin is standing right behind him, and that's what happened to vandalize Stonehenge. In genocides, this is a genocide that's evolving in the United States. In genocides, what you have is a lot of times the women can be raped, the children are murdered, and it's because what it does is that it creates a lot of chaos in the society when that happens. You see that in Nigeria with the Boko Haram. He said that, Boko, I think that's kind of like Boko in in French, and then because they're francophone in there. But haram means chaos. It means mayhem and chaos. A harem is actually a word where you have a bunch of women living together, and there's chaos all the time. He said, you think about it, having a harem of women, wives, you have 100 wives, well, they're always fighting for power, right? Okay, so it's lots of chaos, it's mayhem all the time. And then they take the girls, they kidnap them out of school, they come back, their families don't want them back. What do you do with a society where there's all messed up like that? And that's where world peace comes in. He said that's our job as the overview idea of world peace, is to bring societies back together again and to unify this idea. But what happened in Stonehenge a long time ago was that the children were affected, and then they vandalized the fifth door, which was the fourth door of the ones that created chaos and mayhem. This has happened over and over again in society. One of our people, one of the projects associated with this is Torhana's Freedom. The question that you ask people who are the fourth row people are, who has what you want? Okay, who has what you want? If you ask Donald Trump, who will he say that? Who, if he doesn't have any money now, is he borrowing money from Putin? Who has what he wants? If you look at Congress, the people who are bringing guns on the floor of the House or the Senate, who has what they want? It's Donald Trump. They want him, they're supporting him to raise him up and give him the power, but they don't have the law on their side. They're lawless people. Okay, they're not standing on their oath of office, but they believe they have, because they have the guns, they have the power to enforce what they have, because the other people don't have guns. Of course you're going to go along with what we say because we have the guns. We can start a civil war. Okay, can they start a civil war? 25% of the population, and this is why where we are now as a nation is 25% of the population believes that guns and everything is their solution. So if Donald Trump is saying, he says, okay, I want you to vote for me, what happens if they do, and what happens if they don't? So we are looking now at the world peace marketing strategy. Right down here, this fourth row. What do they want? Who is what they want? The first project for those people is the light source invention. And basically what it's doing is it's saying, it's like the difference between light and darkness. The principles that create a sense of unity and balance again. And that is when I introduced the plan for this invention, but I wrote the letter to the Supreme Court that introduces universal law into the U.S. legal system. When I did that helped to create a sense of balance in the legal system. Okay? But Donald Trump doesn't believe in that. He says, I don't believe in God's law. He said, and then what happens is that starts to separate out the people who do believe in God's law. They say, I'm a Christian, I believe in God's law. So it separates out, it starts to collapse things. It starts to collapse all those things, not in a bad way, but it starts to separate out the groups of people, the Christians who are saying, I believe in God's law, universal law, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I believe that, that isn't going to work anymore if the person says, I have a gun and I can shoot you. The law of the West and might is right is Middle-aged thinking. Why do we have to kick back to the Middle Ages? Okay, now the next one is Torhana's Freedom. And when the person has been making all these waves and causing problems, then what happens is Torhana's Freedom, they go to jail. And Torhana, that project was Hana was somebody who there's, let's say she created mayhem back at, let's say, the time of Stonehenge, and what they did is they buried her alive in a tor. They got tired of this, but there's cases of abuse of power in all the different cultures. So let's say there's before Jesus could, let's say Jesus stood up and defended Mary Magdalene. Okay, she was creating chaos, and she was getting revenge on people. And why was she doing that? Because it was like the people who carried the guns onto the floor. They're creating chaos. So they got together, the people there got together, and they tried to stone her. Jesus said, "Stop, I'll assume responsibility for this." Okay? So then what he did was, for the rest of his life, basically, and I have a feeling that this was, Mary Magdalene was the devil, the so-called devil, the person who was dragging backwards, who tempted Jesus. So that was the point where he stood up and he addressed conflict resolution and how to stop somebody from doing that. And I'm kind of in that same situation. I have people who are doing that in the organization, and so far they're only doing things that are in the background that I cannot face right now. But I have to face that too. Then the time machine. Okay, so let's say, how many other cases were there? There's Hannah and Stonehenge. There's Mary Magdalene and Jesus, and Jesus stood up to defend her. And then there was, let's say, there's a legend that Arthur was buried alive in a crystal cave. So why was he buried alive? Because he abused his power. He was creating mayhem. He was affecting what was happening on the, let's say, on the political level between the kings. And that was when, let's say, we have the story of Mordred and taking over the idea of the King Arthur in Camelot. Okay, then we had, how about Joan of Arc? And before she was hearing voices, before she could leave her town, she faced down a woman who was crazy. So why was she crazy? She terrorized the people of her village. Though the crazy woman terrorized the village people. The kids would play out in the woods, and she would come and she'd terrorize them. I mean, kids might have been killed at that point in time because they're the ones who are targeted. But what happened was, I think that this was part of the 100 Years' War, and when they found out that Joan had a lot of power, then the Burgundians, who from Henry V, with the people who had moved into France from England, they basically hired crazy people to go out, and they supported them to go out and create chaos. So let's say that what we have now is we have this idea of protecting the bringing in outsiders to do this. The woman was probably French, and she was working with the Burgundians, the people outside. Now, a lot of times with the genocide, you have the people inside and the people outside. The culture, there's a sense of division between the two. Like in Africa, there has been like the white people moving in, perpetrating a genocide against the black people because of that, and that is talked about in our conflict resolution brochures. But what happens if there's like a flip-flop idea too, when the French people or the Americans are bringing in people from outside to infiltrate in, to give them the power that they need to maintain the structure right there that is oppressive, the hostile takeover. This is all part of a society when it reaches the end of a cycle. So that's where all of this comes in. We are now facing the possibility that the final battle is not going to be between Trump and Biden. It's going to be between Putin and Biden, or even Xi Jinping and Biden. And is Biden ready to deal with that yet? Can he deal with that? is it up to him to deal with it? I think what we're going to do is we're going to do the exit strategy for Iraq proposal, and that is going to address this idea of protocol for ending genocides based on this revenge and character defamation that has been going on with the lies. There are two power games that are based on weaving illusion. Now, the last thing that I wanted to talk about was Joe Biden doesn't have the capacity to do this. So what it is our organization that is going to introduce this protocol for ending a genocide. And instead of fighting it out between Russia and the United States, or China and Russia and the United States, this is a global war that's devolving. We are going to address this protocol and start not a rebellion, we're going to start the plan for world peace. Everybody, once they reach that point where they're by themselves, when everything has collapsed and it's an individual level, then what will happen is, and it can happen in families, the idea of the Civil War, dividing families, it'll come down to the individual level, and that's when people vote. They'll be fighting for their lives, basically, but our unalienable rights from our Creator are to guarantee that we have the right to create the life we want. Okay, now that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today, was if it comes down to the point where Trump is acquitted, the Republicans acquit Trump, what'll happen is he'll just go down to Florida and he'll bring together his people, and they'll surround him down there like another civil war happening. But don't worry about the Russia, because Trump can't stop Putin. But Trump cannot defend himself against Putin. So what he'll do is he'll just come in and he'll open this door. But the rest of us, instead of having guns in our pocket, we don't need guns. What we need is a plan that benefits everyone, and that is the world peace plan. Okay? We have the power to stop this and to insist. We're kind of like moms and dads, us older people who basically used to flash the peace sign. It's time for us to get off our rear ends and do something about this. We'll let the younger people worry about the economy, and we'll just kind of like flash the peace sign, okay? Okay, to all of you who are old enough to remember, let's say, the Vietnam War, to all of you who remember, what happened there, and you're maybe went there, or you were a conscientious objector, or you were totally oblivious to what was going on because you were in school or you were in college and you had a deferment, okay? Or older than that and you remember the Korean War or World War II. Okay, that is the next symbol. Let's call that the next symbol that we need to have, and we'll just kind of let the young people think that it's kind of like the Vulcan idea or something like that. No. I remember that too. That was when I was in high school. Okay, so there we go. So it's time for us to start to stand up. We don't need guns anymore. We need world peace, and the world peace movement has started. The last people to come in, we're kind of like in the American Revolution. The last people to come in were the people who functioned for their own interests. Eventually they'll catch on, they'll figure it out. We'll flip them around and get them settled. But instead of having it go for years and years and years, we're going to just crunch everything together, and we're just going to keep flashing the peace sign, okay? Go for it. Thanks. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, because now more than anything, this is important to us, each and every single person. Stand up and defend the future. Stand up and defend the kids. Okay, thanks.